On what was supposed to be my wedding day, my own son cornered me against the wall with a cold metal rod at my throat. "Either you cancel this wedding, or I'll bury both of you today," he screamed. The white dress I was wearing nearly became my shroud. Good afternoon, everyone. What a blessing to be able to speak with you all today. My name is Ida Florence Grace. I'm 72 years old and live in this peaceful little town of Willow Springs in rural Missouri. I was born right here in this corner of the Ozarks, and after many twists and turns in life, I ended up returning to put down roots where it all began. Today, my greatest pleasure is spending afternoons on my porch, watching people pass by and trying to guess their stories. I've set up a special corner there with my mother's rocking chair, and that's where I watch the world go by. The view overlooks the town center, where I can follow the movement in the square and greet folks I know. I always have freshly brewed coffee and homemade butter cookies for anyone who drops by. You know, I've always had this gift for understanding people just by looking at them. It's as if I can read what isn't being said. Sometimes someone passes by smiling, but I can see the hidden sadness in their eyes. Other times, I see a couple arguing in the square and know they'll make up before they get home. I think it was after everything I went through in life that I developed this sensitivity. In the evenings, I like to watch my old movies. I have a DVD collection that my grandchildren keep telling me is a thing of the past, but for me, each of these films holds a little piece of life. I especially enjoy romances and dramas that show how complicated human relationships can be. Perhaps because my own life would make quite a movie, wouldn't it? My home is my greatest pride. Small but immaculate, with everything in its place. The walls are painted light blue, a color that soothes the soul, and I have little plant pots everywhere. Call it an old woman's hobby, but I like to see living things around me. Each corner has a special touch: curtains I sewed myself, family photos in vintage frames, the collection of figurines on the shelf. Keeping everything in order gives me a sense that, at least here, I can control things. And all of you watching me now, tell me in the comments, what town are you watching from? And what time of day did you find this grandmother talking? Are you having morning coffee, afternoon tea, or already in your pajamas getting ready for bed? I imagine you on the other side, as if you were visitors on my porch, and that warms my heart. Let me know, okay? I want to know each person who takes time to listen to this old lady. Today I wanted to share with you a story I've carried for many years. A story about choices, about trusting the wrong people, and about how, sometimes, salvation comes from the hands we least expect. It's not easy to talk about this, even after so much time, but perhaps my experience might help someone going through something similar. It all began when I was widowed with a young son to raise, and years later, when my hair was already turning gray, I thought I had found a second chance at love. I was born here in Willow Springs on Market Day, as my mother, Sarah Josephine Grace, used to say. A strong woman who woke before sunrise and went to bed after everyone else in the house. Daddy's name was Orville Fenton Grace, a man of few words but many gestures of affection. He worked the land, had a small plot where he planted beans, corn, and potatoes. Sometimes when the rain was good, we could even sell some at the town market. Our house was simple, wooden with a tin roof, at the end of Maple Street. It had just 2 small bedrooms, one for my parents and another where we 5 children slept. I was in the middle, with 2 older sisters, Mary Ann and Jo Beth, and 2 younger brothers, Clayton and Andrew. Oh, how I miss them. Today, only Andrew and I remain. He lives in Springfield and comes to visit during the holidays. The floor was wooden, which Mama swept every day with a broom she made herself. In the kitchen, a wood stove that stayed lit all day, and a water pitcher that kept water cool even on the hottest days in the Ozarks. The bathroom? It was an outhouse in the yard. Poor Mama had to carry water from the well for everything. My childhood was simple, but rich with affection and teachings. We would wake up early with the rooster's crow. Mama was already up, preparing breakfast, cornbread with milk when we had it, or with butter when things were better. After breakfast, the girls would help with household chores, while the boys went with Daddy to the fields. I loved when they sent me to fetch water from the well. It was far, but on the way, I would meet my friends, Dorothy, Martha, and Kitty. We would walk together, balancing buckets of water on our heads like true artists. We talked about the boys at school, about the stories the teacher told, and dreamed about the day we would visit St. Louis, which to us seemed like an enchanted place. At school, we studied in a single room with children of various ages together. The teacher, Miss Linda, was strict but fair. I remember she would get especially upset when we arrived late because of the distance. "Knowledge waits for no one," she would say. She was the one who taught me my first letters and encouraged me to continue studying, even when Daddy thought girls didn't need much education. The games of that time were simple: spinning tops, marbles, hopscotch, hide and seek in the yard full of fruit trees. There was an apple tree that was my favorite hiding spot. I would climb up there and stay quiet, eating the fruit while others searched for me. At night, we would sit on the porch to listen to stories the elders told. Ghost stories, tales of the boogeyman they said appeared on moonlit nights, of the spirits that protected the forests. Life was hard, but we didn't notice so much because it was the same for everyone. During droughts, we struggled. Daddy had to work on more distant farms, sometimes gone for weeks. Mama cried in secret, but in front of us, she always maintained her strength. "God is good and doesn't abandon his children," she repeated like a mantra. It was during this time that I began developing this way of observing people. Children notice everything, don't they? I saw when Mama disguised her sadness, noticed when Daddy came home too tired even to talk. I perceived the glances between adults when something bad happened in the neighborhood. I think that's how I learned to read in people's eyes what their mouths didn't say. At 12, I met Arthur, a new boy who arrived at school. He was the son of a shopkeeper who came from Kansas City to try his luck in Willow Springs. A different boy, with a sweet look and polite manner. The other girls whispered, but I remained quiet, just watching. One day, he offered me a piece of the cake he brought in his lunchbox. It was the beginning of a friendship that, years later, would turn into something more. In those days, I already dreamed of being a teacher like Miss Linda. I wanted to teach children, show them there was a bigger world beyond those dry lands. Mama supported me as much as she could. Behind Daddy's back, she saved some coins to buy notebooks and pencils for me. "My daughter will be somebody in life," she would tell her friend. The town festivals were the most anticipated moments of the year. The 4th of July, with the high bonfire, music playing all night, and traditional foods, corn on the cob, apple pie, barbecue, and the Harvest Festival in October, when people from all neighboring towns came and the square was full. That's when we saw different clothes, new hairstyles, and dreamed of a less difficult life. When I turned 15, Daddy allowed me to go to the dance at the Harvest Festival. I wore a dress sewn by Mama, made from fabric my godmother brought from St. Louis. Light blue with a sash at the waist. I felt like a princess. It was at this festival that I danced for the first time with Arthur, already a 17-year-old young man. He had grown up handsome, worked with his father at the general store, and had plans to study accounting. Life followed its natural course in Willow Springs. I finished the studies that were possible there and began helping Miss Linda with the younger children. At 18, I got engaged to Arthur. Mama cried with joy. Daddy put on a stern face, but was proud deep down. We planned to get married when he returned from St. Louis, where he would study for 2 years. But destiny had other plans for us. In 1972, a terrible drought hit our region. The crops died, animals wasted away, and many people had to leave. Daddy fell ill, the heavy work of a lifetime finally taking its toll. Mama spent what little we had saved on medicines. Arthur had to postpone his studies to help his family, and I began working in the mayor's house as a domestic help. That's when I met Neil, a young man from Jefferson City who had come to work as the mayor's driver. Tall, talkative, full of stories about the capital and other places he had visited. He treated me differently from the other maids, always kind, always with a compliment on the tip of his tongue. Arthur noticed the change in my manner, the conversations I had with Neil. Jealousy led to arguments, arguments to distance. And that's how, without realizing it, I drifted away from my first love and grew closer to the man who would become my husband and the father of my only son. A choice that years later I would understand was just the beginning of a long story of decisions that would change my life forever. My childhood was simple, but rich with affection and teachings. We would wake up early with the rooster's crow. Mama was already up, preparing breakfast, cornbread with milk when we had it, or with butter when things were better. After breakfast, the girls would help with household chores, while the boys went with Daddy to the fields. I loved when they sent me to fetch water from the well. It was far, but on the way, I would meet my friends, Dorothy, Martha, and Kitty. We would walk together, balancing buckets of water on our heads like true artists. We talked about the boys at school, about the stories the teacher told, and dreamed about the day we would visit St. Louis, which to us seemed like an enchanted place. At school, we studied in a single room with children of various ages together. The teacher, Miss Linda, was strict but fair. I remember she would get especially upset when we arrived late because of the distance. "Knowledge waits for no one," she would say. She was the one who taught me my first letters and encouraged me to continue studying, even when Daddy thought girls didn't need much education. The games of that time were simple: spinning tops, marbles, hopscotch, hide and seek in the yard full of fruit trees. There was an apple tree that was my favorite hiding spot. I would climb up there and stay quiet, eating the fruit while others searched for me. At night, we would sit on the porch to listen to stories the elders told. Ghost stories, tales of the boogeyman they said appeared on moonlit nights, of the spirits that protected the forests. Life was hard, but we didn't notice so much because it was the same for everyone. During droughts, we struggled. Daddy had to work on more distant farms, sometimes gone for weeks. Mama cried in secret, but in front of us, she always maintained her strength. "God is good and doesn't abandon his children," she repeated like a mantra. It was during this time that I began developing this way of observing people. Children notice everything, don't they? I saw when Mama disguised her sadness, noticed when Daddy came home too tired even to talk. I perceived the glances between adults when something bad happened in the neighborhood. I think that's how I learned to read in people's eyes what their mouths didn't say. At 12, I met Arthur, a new boy who arrived at school. He was the son of a shopkeeper who came from Kansas City to try his luck in Willow Springs. A different boy, with a sweet look and polite manner. The other girls whispered, but I remained quiet, just watching. One day, he offered me a piece of the cake he brought in his lunchbox. It was the beginning of a friendship that, years later, would turn into something more. In those days, I already dreamed of being a teacher like Miss Linda. I wanted to teach children, show them there was a bigger world beyond those dry lands. Mama supported me as much as she could. Behind Daddy's back, she saved some coins to buy notebooks and pencils for me. "My daughter will be somebody in life," she would tell her friend. The town festivals were the most anticipated moments of the year. The 4th of July, with the high bonfire, music playing all night, and traditional foods, corn on the cob, apple pie, barbecue. And the Harvest Festival in October when people from all neighboring towns came and the square was full. That's when we saw different clothes, new hairstyles, and dreamed of a less difficult life. When I turned 15, Daddy allowed me to go to the dance at the Harvest Festival. I wore a dress sewn by Mama, made from fabric my godmother brought from St. Louis, light blue with a sash at the waist. I felt like a princess. It was at this festival that I danced for the first time with Arthur, already a 17-year-old young man. He had grown up handsome, worked with his father at the general store, and had plans to study accounting. Life followed its natural course in Willow Springs. I finished the studies that were possible there and began helping Miss Linda with the younger children. At 18, I got engaged to Arthur. Mama cried with joy, Daddy put on a stern face but was proud deep down. We planned to get married when he returned from St. Louis, where he would study for 2 years. But destiny had other plans for us. In 1972, a terrible drought hit our region. The crops died, animals wasted away, and many people had to leave. Daddy fell ill, the heavy work of a lifetime finally taking its toll. Mama spent what little we had saved on medicines. Arthur had to postpone his studies to help his family, and I began working in the mayor's house as a domestic help. That's when I met Neil, a young man from Jefferson City who had come to work as the mayor's driver. Tall, talkative, full of stories about the capital and other places he had visited. He treated me differently from the other maids, always kind, always with a compliment on the tip of his tongue. Arthur noticed the change in my manner, the conversations I had with Neil. Jealousy led to arguments, arguments to distance. And that's how, without realizing it, I drifted away from my first love and grew closer to the man who would become my husband and the father of my only son. A choice that, years later, I would understand was just the beginning of a long story of decisions that would change my life forever. Neil entered my life casually, but ended up taking everything. After that terrible drought of 72, when my engagement to Arthur crumbled like a house of cards in a strong wind, I accepted the marriage proposal from the mayor's driver. We were married in a simple ceremony at the Little Chapel of Grace. Mama sewed my dress with white fabric bought on installment, and the mayor lent us the town hall for the reception. It was a day of joy mixed with uncertainty. Shortly after the wedding, Neil received a job offer in Memphis, a historic city in Tennessee. "We'll have a better life there, Ida," he told me with that convincing manner he always had. "There's no future for us in this small town." With a heavy heart, I said goodbye to my parents, my siblings, my Willow Springs. I promised to visit whenever I could. I didn't imagine it would take decades to fulfill that promise. Life in Memphis was completely different. We lived in a small rented room in a tenement full of families. The city's busy streets left me breathless, both from exhaustion and from the wonder. On weekends, Neil would take me to see the Mississippi River. I, a country girl who had never seen so much water in one place, was moved by each visit. It was as if the river washed away the homesickness. In the first few months, everything seemed like a dream. Neil worked as a private driver for a construction businessman and always brought some little gift for me: a lipstick, a scarf, a cheap bracelet. I found work as a maid in a wealthy family's home in East Memphis. I returned late, by bus, tired, but satisfied that we were building our life together. That's when I became pregnant. When I told Neil, he celebrated, spinning me around right there in the middle of the tiny room. "It's going to be a strong boy like his father," he said, already planning the future of a child not yet born. And it was indeed a boy. I chose the name Timothy in honor of my paternal grandfather whom I loved so much. Timothy Forrest Grace, born at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis on a rainy March dawn in 1975. With the baby's arrival, our life became tighter. I had to leave work for a few months, and Neil's salary barely covered rent and food. It was during this time that I noticed the first changes in him. He came home late, smelling of alcohol. When I asked where he had been, he would get irritated, pounding the table. "I'm working double shifts to support you both, woman, and I still have to explain myself." When Timothy was 6 months old, I went back to work, now as a laundress for several families in the neighborhood. I left my little boy with a neighbor, Mrs. Zelda, an elderly lady who had lost her children in a flood years earlier and treated the tenement children as if they were her grandchildren. She charged little and cared with love. "Go to work without worry, my dear. Little Timmy is in good hands." It was during this time that Neil began to disappear for days. He said he was making trips for his boss, carrying goods to rural areas. He would return with money in his pocket, but increasingly distant, more irritable. One night, I woke up to noises in the living room. It was him, rummaging through the drawers where I kept the little money I managed to save. When I asked what he was doing, he pushed me hard against the wall. "Shut your mouth, woman. The money is mine. I'm the one who supports this house." That was the first push of many to come. Gradually, that charming man who had won me over in Willow Springs was transformed into a stranger with empty eyes and heavy fists. Excuses always followed. It was fatigue. It was the drink. You provoked me. And I, young, alone in a big city with a small child, believed it was just a rough patch, that he would change. Timothy grew up handsome and smart, the spitting image of his father, but with an observant manner that reminded me of myself. From an early age, I realized he understood more than a child should. When he was 4, after a night when Neil came home violent, I found my little boy in his room, hugging his pillow, eyes wide with fear. "Everything's okay, my son," I lied, with a swollen lip. He looked at me with those dark, deep eyes. "No, it's not, Mom. He hurt you again." To protect my son, I began sending Timothy to Mrs. Zelda's on days when Neil came home altered. I made up stories, said his father was sick, tired, needed silence. But children perceive everything. By age 6, Timothy was already placing himself in front of me when his father raised his voice. "Leave my mom alone," he would shout, tiny but as brave as an adult. In 1983, when Timothy was 8, something happened that changed our lives forever. Neil came home one Sunday afternoon with a new car, a dark blue Chevy, gleaming. "Come see what your husband got, Ida," he shouted from the street. I went down with Timothy, suspicious. In 8 years of marriage, we had never been able to afford even a bicycle, let alone a car like that. "Where did this car come from, Neil?" I asked, while Timothy ran around the vehicle, amazed. "Got it from the boss, woman. Promotion. Now I'm delivery supervisor, going to coordinate other drivers." The story didn't make sense, but I had learned not to question too much. That night, he took us to dinner at a steakhouse in downtown Memphis, the first time we had eaten out in years. In the following weeks, life seemed to improve. Neil brought money home, talked about buying an apartment, about putting Timothy in a private school. He came home earlier, less violent. He even gave me a gold earring and necklace set for my birthday. I wanted to believe that things were finally working out for our family. One Thursday, I was hanging clothes on the community clothesline when I saw 2 men in suits entering the building. They asked for Neil with the blue Chevy. My heart froze. Woman's instinct that has seen much suffering. I said he wasn't home, that he was my husband. What did they want with him? They showed police badges. "Ma'am, we need to ask some questions about your husband's activities." In that terrible conversation, I discovered that Neil had not been a businessman's driver for almost a year. He was involved with transporting stolen goods, smuggling from the border, and God knows what else. The blue Chevy had been bought with dirty money. I cried, denied, said it was a mistake. But deep down, I knew. All the signs were there. I just didn't want to see. That night, Neil didn't come home. The next day, I learned from the radio news. There had been a police chase on Interstate 40. A car had rolled over. The driver died instantly. It was him. He died as he had lived in recent years, running, hiding, taking risks that ended up costing his life. I found myself a widow at 30, with an 8-year-old son to raise, without money, without family nearby, and with the shame of being the criminal's wife. Neighbors whispered, some mothers no longer let their children play with Timothy. I had to take my boy out of school because other children called him thief's son. That night, sitting on the edge of the bed where Timothy had finally fallen asleep after crying for hours over his father's death, I made a promise. I'll give you a dignified life, my son. We're going to start over, just the 2 of us. I didn't know how, but I was sure I would do anything to protect my son and clear our reputation. The next morning, I packed 2 suitcases with the little we had. I took the money that was hidden in the mattress lining, savings from years of hard work that I hid from Neil. It wasn't much, but it would cover tickets and survival for a few weeks. I took Timothy by the hand and we went to the bus station. Not to Willow Springs. Shame prevented me from returning to my hometown as a failure. I chose Lebanon, a city in Tennessee big enough to start over anonymously, close enough to feel like home. "Where are we going, Mom?" asked Timothy, clinging to my skirt as we waited for the bus. "To our new life, my son. Just the two of us against the world." He squeezed my hand with that strength and determination that already showed the protective man he would become. "I'll take care of you, Mom. I promise." What I didn't know was that this innocent promise from an 8-year-old boy would transform years later into a protection so fierce it would almost destroy us both. Lebanon welcomed us with the typical warmth of Tennessee and the busy movement of its famous farmers' market. We rented a small room in the back of Mrs. Emily's house, a widow who took pity on me and my little boy. "Young woman with a small child needs help," she would say. At first it was difficult. I washed clothes, cleaned houses, sold homemade cookies at the market on weekends. Timothy, at 8 years old, already helped me as he could, carrying loads of laundry, delivering the cookies. I managed to enroll Timothy in a public school where he soon stood out for his intelligence. "Your son is very smart, Mrs. Grace," the teacher would tell me. "He has a future." Those words were balm for my tired heart. At night, after a whole day of work, I still found strength to sit with him, check his notebook, encourage his studies. "It's by studying that you'll have a better life than ours, my son." The years in Lebanon were of much work, but also of reconstruction. I saved penny by penny until I could rent a simple house in a better neighborhood. I got a steady job as a cook in a downtown diner. Timothy grew up strong and determined. In his teens, he started working after school, delivering groceries from the neighborhood market. All the money he earned, he gave to me. "Save it for our own house, Mom." But not everything was roses. As he grew up, Timothy became increasingly closed off, distrustful of everyone. He didn't make friends easily, didn't bring colleagues home. When I tried to have one or another boyfriend, he made a point of scaring away the suitors. "None of these guys are any good, Mom. They're all like my father." And the hardest part was that deep down, I myself was afraid to get involved again. The marks Neil left were not only on the body, but on the soul. When Timothy turned 18 in 1993, he got a position at Bank of America through a competitive exam. It was an immense joy. My son, a bank employee with a good salary, health insurance, stability, everything I had dreamed for him. That day, I cried with happiness. "See, my son? All sacrifice was worth it." With Timothy's stable job and my work at the diner, we finally managed to buy our own little house, small but ours, in a nice neighborhood. Timothy made a point of taking care of everything for me. "You've worked too hard, Mom. Now it's my turn to give back." Gradually, I let him take control of the accounts, the decisions. It was easier that way, and I was tired of being the family pillar. Time passed, and Timothy, now a man of almost 30, remained single, living with me. When I brought up the subject of a girlfriend, marriage, he would change the subject. "I already have you to take care of, Mom. I don't need anyone else." That began to worry me. A son so attached wasn't natural. I wanted him to have his own family, his own life. But at the same time, I felt secure with him around. In 2005, an opportunity arose at the bank where Timothy worked, a transfer to Oak Ridge in eastern Tennessee. The salary would be better, the working conditions too. "I'll refuse, Mom. I won't leave you here alone." For the first time in a long time, I put my foot down. "You will go, Timothy. It's a chance to grow in your career. I'll be fine here. I'm used to Lebanon." After much insistence, he accepted the transfer, but with one condition: I would go with him. We sold our little house in Lebanon and moved to Oak Ridge, a different city, far from everything we knew, but with new opportunities. Timothy quickly adapted to work, I not so much to the city. I missed Tennessee's warmth, the accent, the food, the people. It was in Oak Ridge in 2010, when I was already 58 years old, and Timothy 35, that I met Alan Morgan. He was a client of the bank where Timothy worked, a businessman in the grain industry, a widower, about 10 years older than me. It started with a good morning in the supermarket line, then a coffee on Sunday after church, and soon we were meeting regularly. Alan was different from all the men I had known, kind without seeming fake, attentive without being suffocating. He treated me like a queen, took me to places I never imagined visiting. For the first time in decades, I felt like a woman again, not just a mother. I blossomed like the flowers in the garden after the rain. When I told Timothy about Alan, I saw his face change. It was as if a dark cloud passed over his eyes. "Who is this old man? What does he want with you?" With each question, his voice grew more altered. I tried to calm him, explain that it was just a friendship, but deep down, I knew it was already more than that. And Timothy knew it too. The following weeks were tense. Timothy investigated Alan's life on his own, looked for information at the bank, questioned acquaintances. "He has something to hide, Mom. Nobody is that perfect." When I went out with Alan, Timothy called several times, invented emergencies to make me come home. 6 months after meeting Alan, he asked me to marry him. It was during a simple dinner at his house, without grand gestures, just sincere words. "Ida, life gave me a second chance with you. I don't want to waste more time. Will you be my wife?" My heart almost leaped out of my mouth. At 59 years old, I didn't expect to get married again, to have another chance to love and be loved. When I arrived home that night, I found Timothy waiting for me in the living room, with a tense face. "What did that old man want with you until this hour?" I took a deep breath and told him about the marriage proposal. His reaction was worse than I had imagined. He knocked over the coffee table with a slap, screamed, called me ungrateful. "After everything I've done for you, you're going to trade me for a stranger? He just wants a free housekeeper." In the following days, the situation only got worse. Timothy missed work, started drinking, something he had never done before. He followed Alan around town, called him making veiled threats. I thought about ending everything to protect Alan and calm my son. But a part of me, the one that had been suffocated by decades of sacrifice, screamed for freedom. Alan remained firm despite the threats. "I understand your son's concern, Ida, but I won't give up on us." He suggested that the three of us talk to clear things up. We scheduled a dinner at home on a Friday. I prepared Timothy's favorite food, set the table with care, prayed that everything would work out. Alan arrived punctually at 7 p.m. with wine and flowers for me. Timothy deliberately arrived almost an hour late, clearly altered, smelling of alcohol. The dinner was a disaster. Timothy barely touched the food, responded with monosyllables to Alan's attempts at conversation, and when the subject of marriage came up, he exploded. "You think I'm an idiot? You think I don't know what's happening here? This old man just wants what's ours." Alan remained calm, even when Timothy accused him of being an opportunist, of having ulterior motives with me. "Your son is scared, Ida. It's natural. He's afraid of losing you." His tranquility only made Timothy more furious. Before the situation worsened, Alan said goodbye, leaving me alone with my son. That night, we had the worst argument of our lives. "Either him or me, Mom. Choose now." For the first time, I didn't give in to Timothy's demands. "Son, you will always have my love, but you can't decide my life. I will marry Alan." He left, slamming the door, and didn't come home that night. The following week, Timothy requested a transfer back to Tennessee, this time to Nashville. "If you want to stay with this old man, stay, but I won't watch this." The apartment we shared was in my name, bought with the money from the sale of our house in Lebanon. He made it clear he didn't want anything, just to get away. It was like a knife in my heart, but I maintained my decision. Alan and I set the wedding for 3 months later, enough time to organize a simple ceremony just for close friends. I sent an invitation to Timothy in Nashville with no response. I called several times. He didn't answer. The pain of not having my only son at my wedding was almost unbearable. A week before the ceremony, I received a call from Timothy. "I'm coming to your wedding, Mom. I can't let you go through this alone." His voice sounded strange, but I attributed it to emotion. I was so happy that I cried on the phone. "Thank you, my son. This means the world to me." On the eve of the wedding, Timothy arrived in Oak Ridge. He was haggard, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. He tried to smile, hugged me, but I felt something different in him. "Is everything all right, my son?" He nodded. "Just tired from the trip, Mom. Tomorrow I'll be better for you." The morning of my wedding dawned sunny, like a blessing from the heavens. The dress I chose was simple, light blue, nothing white or with a veil. After all, at 60 years old, I wanted something elegant but appropriate. Alan would pick me up at 10 a.m. so we could go together to the civil ceremony, followed by a lunch at his favorite restaurant. I was in my room, finishing getting ready, when Timothy knocked on the door. He had showered, shaved, seemed calmer. "You look beautiful, Mom." I smiled, moved. "Thank you, son. It means a lot to have you here today." It was then that everything changed. Timothy locked the bedroom door, and when he turned to me, I saw a look I didn't know, something wild, desperate. In his hand, he carried a metal rod he had torn from the bathroom curtain. "There won't be any wedding, Mom. I won't let that old man take you away from me." I tried to calm him, tell him that no one was taking me away, that I would always be his mother. But Timothy wasn't listening anymore. "All these years taking care of you, protecting you, and this is how you repay me? By marrying a stranger?" He pressed the metal rod against the wall near my face, cornering me. "Either you cancel this wedding now, or I'll leave here and end you both." My heart raced. The boy who had sworn to protect me now threatened me. The son I raised with so much love now looked at me with hatred. In that moment, I understood that I had created not a protector, but a jailer. For years, I allowed Timothy to control my life, my decisions, all in the name of maternal love. Now, I was a prisoner of this distorted love. "You don't understand, Mom. That man is not who he says he is," Timothy shouted, pressing the metal rod against the wall, so close I could feel the cold metal almost touch my neck. "The shipment he's waiting for at the port, it's not grain." That phrase, spoken in the midst of Timothy's madness, lit something in my mind. "What are you talking about, son?" He continued, the words coming out uncontrollably. "I investigated him, Mom. False documents, strange meetings, overseas contacts. This so-called Alan is no grain businessman at all." In that terrible moment, cornered by my own son, clarity took hold of me. It was as if, for the first time in decades, I could see beyond the layers of maternal love and glimpse the truth. Timothy wasn't just jealous. He really believed he had discovered something about Alan. With what little calm I could gather, I spoke softly. "Timothy, lower that rod. Let's talk properly. Tell me what you discovered." He hesitated, the metal trembling in his hand. "Will you listen to me? Will you believe me?" I nodded, and slowly, Timothy lowered the metal rod. His eyes still had that frightening intensity, but at least he wasn't directly threatening me anymore. "I heard his conversations at the bank, Mom. Strange calls about a shipment arriving at the Jacksonville port, documents with values that don't match what he declares. He is not who he says he is." Even in the midst of that terror, a part of me, the one that learned to survive Neil, knew I needed to buy time. "Okay, son. You win. I'll cancel the wedding." Timothy looked at me suspicious. "Do you swear, Mom, you won't marry him?" I nodded. "Give me the phone so I can call him." With a trembling hand, Timothy passed me his cell phone. Instead of calling Alan, I dialed Bernard, Timothy's cousin, a police officer in Nashville, who had come for the wedding. When he answered, I spoke in a controlled voice. "Bernard, tell your boss that Alan's wedding at Jacksonville Port today is canceled. The bride won't show up. I need you to come to my house urgently. Timothy is not feeling well." I hung up the phone and faced my son. His eyes oscillated between confusion and relief. "There, son, I canceled everything. Alan won't come anymore." Timothy completely dropped the metal rod and collapsed on the bed, as if all energy had left his body. I began to cry, not from fear, but from a mixture of sadness and determination. My son needed help, and Alan needed to be investigated. Bernard arrived in 15 minutes, accompanied by another police officer. They found Timothy lying down in an almost catatonic state, while I, still in the blue wedding dress, explained everything in whispers. He said something about shipments at the port, about Alan not being who he says he is. It could be delusion, but... Bernard exchanged glances with his colleague. "We'll check this out, Aunt. Meanwhile, we're going to take Timothy to a hospital. He needs help." At that moment, my heart broke into 1,000 pieces, but I knew it was the right thing to do. My son, my protector, my jailer, needed care that I could no longer provide. I officially canceled the wedding, citing a sudden illness in the family. Alan seemed to understand, said we could reschedule when everything was better. His understanding only increased my confusion. Was he really the good man he seemed, or was Timothy right? The answer came 3 days later, when the police knocked on Alan's door. The coded report I made through Bernard triggered a lightning investigation. They discovered that Alan Morgan was, in fact, the endpoint of a drug trafficking network that used grain export as a facade. The shipment that would arrive at Jacksonville port contained cocaine hidden in sacks of grain. When the news broke in the local media, my world collapsed for the second time. The man I loved, who treated me like a queen, who wanted to marry me, was a criminal. Exactly like Neil had been, only more sophisticated, more dangerous. And my son, in his desperate madness, had seen what I, blinded by love, couldn't see. That night, sitting alone in the apartment, with Timothy hospitalized in a psychiatric clinic and Alan in jail, I understood a terrible truth. My son's violent act, though inexcusable, had saved me. His obsession with protecting me, which I had tried so hard to fight, ended up saving me from a fate that could have been tragic. The tears I shed that night were not only of pain or relief, but of a deep and bitter understanding. Sometimes, our greatest blessings come disguised as our greatest curses. Alan's arrest became news throughout Oak Ridge. Grain businessman arrested in international trafficking operation, headlines proclaimed. And I, who would be the bride, became the subject of local gossip. The old woman who was going to marry the trafficker, they said behind my back as I passed in the street. As if the pain of being deceived by someone I loved wasn't enough, I also had to carry the public shame. But none of this compared to the anguish of having my son hospitalized. Timothy was in a psychiatric clinic in Knoxville, diagnosed with obsessive disorder and psychotic break. The doctors explained that he developed an unhealthy fixation on protecting me, probably triggered by childhood traumas from witnessing his father's violence. "It's as if he took on the role of your guardian, ma'am, but in an extreme and distorted way," explained the psychiatrist. I visited my son 3 times a week, taking the bus to Knoxville, a tiring journey of almost 2 hours. Each visit was a mix of hope and despair. Some days, Timothy seemed better, more lucid. On others, he barely recognized me, lost in his fears and conspiracy theories. "He'll come back, Mom. He'll send someone after us," he would murmur, looking at the corners, as if seeing invisible enemies. During one of these visits, about a month after the hospitalization, what I consider the real breaking point of our story happened. I arrived at the clinic on a rainy Sunday afternoon, carrying a bag with Timothy's clean clothes and the butter cookies he loved so much. The nurse greeted me with a sad smile. "Mrs. Grace, today is not being a good day for him." I found my son sitting in a chair by the window, watching the rain fall. He seemed thinner, with an unshaven beard, deep eyes. When I approached, he didn't turn around. "Son, I brought your clean things and some cookies." I put my hand on his shoulder, and that's when he turned. There was something in his eyes that froze me. It wasn't anger or confusion, but a frightening lucidity. "Why do you still come to see me, after what I did?" The question came out like a painful whisper. I sat in the chair next to him. "You're my son, Timothy. I love you, no matter what happens." He shook his head, tears beginning to flow. "I hurt you," threatened, "with a metal rod." His voice faltered. "I'm just like him, just like my father." It was as if lightning had struck between us. The comparison with Neil hit Timothy and me like a physical blow. My son, who had spent his entire life trying to be the opposite of his violent father, had become precisely what he hated most. "Don't say that, my son. You're not like your father." The words came out automatically, but even as I said them, images from the past came back. Neil cornering me against the wall, Timothy doing the same with the metal rod. "Yes, I am, Mom. I saw it in your eyes that day. The same fear you had of him." Timothy covered his face with his hands, sobbing now. "I spent my whole life swearing to protect you from men like my father, and I ended up becoming one of them." At that moment, something broke inside me. The illusion I had nurtured for decades, that Timothy's obsessive protection was just love, completely crumbled. It wasn't love, it was possession, control, fear of abandonment. And I had allowed it, encouraged it even, because I too was afraid of being alone. "Timothy, look at me." I pulled his hands away from his face. "Let's tell the truth, once and for all. I allowed you to control my life. I let you push people away from me, decide where I lived, how I lived, because it was easier that way. Because I was afraid too." He stared at me, surprised by my sudden frankness. "And yes, that day, you reminded me of your father, not because you are like him, but because I let it happen again. I let someone else tell me how to live, who to fall in love with." I took a deep breath, feeling a strength I didn't know I had. "But the difference, my son, is that your father never realized the harm he did, and you're here, suffering because you realized. And the worst part is that I was right about him, Mom. Alan really was a criminal." Timothy's voice came out bitter. "Even so, what I did is unforgivable. You were right about Alan, yes, and that probably saved my life. But the way you did it?" I paused, looking for the right words. "We can't continue like this, Timothy. This obsession with protecting me is destroying us both." It was then that he said the words that changed everything. "I think we need to separate, Mom. I can't stay near you now. I don't trust myself." The shock of that phrase was like a blow to the stomach. In all our lives, we had never really separated. Even when he went to Nashville, I knew it was temporary, a tantrum. But now, it was different. He was an adult man, recognizing that we needed distance to heal. "The doctor said I can do the treatment somewhere else," he continued. "There's a clinic in Chattanooga, in East Tennessee. Closer to our roots, but far enough. From you and all this." My tears were falling uncontrollably now. "If that's what you need, son, it's what we both need, Mom. You'll never be truly free with me around." He held my hands. "I want you to go back to Willow Springs. Go back home, to your people. The house we bought in Lebanon is still rented, brings in a little money, and I have savings in the bank. I can't accept your money, son. Yes, you can. I owe you this. A chance to start over away from me, from my madness." That night, lying alone in the apartment in Oak Ridge, I had a vivid dream. I was in Willow Springs, in my childhood home. Mama was preparing coffee in the kitchen. Daddy was coming in from the fields. I was a child again, without the weights and marks of life. In the dream, I heard Mama saying something she always repeated. "Everything has its time under heaven, my daughter. A time to plant and a time to harvest. A time to cry and a time to smile again." I woke up with my face wet with tears, but with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Timothy was right. We needed to separate to heal. He from the unhealthy obsession of protecting me, I from the dependence I created on this protection. The next morning, I called my brother Andrew in Springfield. After so many years apart, his voice sounded strange, but welcoming. I told him everything, about Alan, about Timothy, about my decision to return to Missouri. Come, my sister, it's high time you returned to your land. The week that followed was one of difficult but necessary decisions. I spoke with Timothy's doctor, who agreed with the transfer to Chattanooga. It will be good for him to be closer to his roots, but with the therapeutic distance from you. I resolved practical issues, sold some furniture, terminated the lease, organized the paperwork for Timothy's treatment transfer. The last visit to the clinic was the most painful. Timothy was more lucid, had begun to respond well to the medication. We sat in the garden, under the shade of a magnolia tree, as we had done so many times in Lebanon. Mom, before you go, I need to say something. Timothy seemed nervous, restless hands in his lap. That day, with the metal rod, I really thought I was protecting you. In my head, I was saving you from another Neil. I know, son. I held his hand. You always wanted to protect me since you were little. But it wasn't just that. He avoided my gaze. It was fear, too. Fear of being alone, of losing you to someone else. As if you were my property. His voice faltered. It's sick, isn't it? It's human, son. We all have our fears. The difference is how we deal with them. I squeezed his hand. I'm proud of you for recognizing this. When I was there in the room with that metal rod, something burst inside me. It was like I could see myself from outside, acting just like my father. I was horrified with myself. He finally faced me, red eyes. I could have really hurt you. But you didn't, son, and now we're here, trying to fix things. The craziest part is that I really had discovered things about Alan. Strange documents at the bank, suspicious phone calls. I tried to warn you in a normal way at first, but you didn't believe me. Then I started getting desperate. This detail always disturbed me. How did I, who prided myself on understanding people, not see the signs with Alan? Perhaps because, like Timothy, I was also trapped in the past, just in a different way. So desperate to have love in old age that I ignored the warnings. Son, I think we both need to learn to trust again. In ourselves, first, then in others. I took a deep breath, feeling the scent of the garden flowers. You're going to get treatment in Chattanooga. I'm going to start over in Willow Springs, and when the time is right, we'll meet again. Do you really think one day I'll get better? That we can have a normal relationship? The hope in his voice almost broke my heart. I'm sure, my son, because you're strong. You always were. I smiled through tears. Stronger even than you imagine. We hugged for a long time, as if trying to keep a little of each other for the lonely days to come. When we separated, Timothy held my face in his hands, as he did when he was a child. Forgive me, Mom? For everything? Only if you forgive me, too. For not realizing sooner. For letting it get to this point. We're even then. He smiled slightly, the first genuine smile in months. When I got up to leave, Timothy held my wrist for a moment. Mom, when you get to Willow Springs, plant an apple tree in the yard for me, like the one Grandma had. I will, son, and when you come to visit me, there will be ripe apples waiting for you. I left the clinic feeling a mixture of pain and liberation. It was as if, at 60 years old, I was finally cutting the umbilical cord, not just to free my son, but to free myself too. The road ahead would be difficult for both of us, but for the first time in a long time, I felt we were heading in the right direction. 3 days later, with 2 suitcases containing what was left of a lifetime, I boarded the bus to Missouri. As the vehicle left Tennessee, I looked out the window at the vast expanses of the countryside stretching to the horizon. So many turns life takes. I left Willow Springs as a girl, passed through Memphis, Lebanon, Oak Ridge, and now, old, I was returning to where it all began. During the long journey, I had time to think about everything that had happened. How could a woman who always prided herself on reading people not realize she was raising an emotionally dependent son? How did I not see the signs that Alan was not who he claimed to be? Perhaps because deep down I too was trapped in unhealthy relationship patterns, repeating with my son and with Alan the same mistakes I made with Neil. On the third night of the journey, the bus stopped at a station in southern Illinois. I got off to stretch my legs and buy a coffee. I was in line at the snack bar when an elderly lady, probably in her 80s, approached me. "You're going back home, aren't you?" She smiled, showing the gaps in her teeth. Surprised by the approach, I just nodded. You can see it in the eyes. There's a different shine when we're going back to the place we should never have left. She gently squeezed my arm. "Everything will be all right, child. We can always start over, no matter the age." Those words from a complete stranger were like a balm. I returned to the bus with a sense of peace I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe it was true. Maybe it's never too late to start over. When I finally arrived in Willow Springs, after almost 4 days of travel, Andrew was waiting for me at the small bus station. My brother, now a white-haired gentleman, opened his arms to me. "Welcome back, sister." His hug triggered something deep in me. A sob that came from my core, carrying decades of pain, fear, and regret. There, in the middle of the dusty station, I cried as I hadn't since I was a girl, in my younger brother's arms. "Cry, Ida. Cleanse that soul." Andrew held me tight, as if fearing I might collapse. "Now you're home." And I was indeed. Willow Springs was no longer the small town of my childhood. It had grown, modernized in some ways. But the sky still had that intense blue that enchanted me as a child. The air still carried the smell of earth and grass that only the Ozarks have. People still greeted each other by name on the streets. It was as if a piece of me, lost for so long, finally returned to its place. Andrew took me to his house, where his wife Zelda welcomed me with a warm hug and a hearty lunch, green beans, country ham, mashed potatoes, all the flavors of my childhood. "You stay here as long as you need, sister-in-law, until you decide what you're going to do." But I already knew what I wanted to do. The next morning, I asked Andrew to take me to see some small rental houses near the town center. We found one, small but airy, close to the central square. The rent was cheap, suitable for my retirement, plus the income from the house in Lebanon. "Are you sure you don't want to stay with us, sister?" Andrew insisted. "I'm sure, my brother. I need my own corner now. I need to learn to live alone for the first time in my life." Within a week, I was settled in my new house. The furniture was sparse: a bed, a wardrobe, a table with 4 chairs, a simple sofa. But each piece was chosen by me, placed where I wanted. That small space was the first in my life that was truly mine, not shared with father, husband, or son. And as I promised Timothy, the first thing I did was plant an apple tree seedling in the small backyard. As I dug the earth, I felt as if I were planting not just a tree, but also the hope of a future in which my son and I could have a healthy relationship, based on true love, not on dependence and control. The first weeks in Willow Springs were strange. I would wake up sometimes disoriented, looking for Timothy, then remembering that he was hundreds of miles away in a clinic in Chattanooga. I called him once a week, short but meaningful conversations. "The apple tree is already growing, son." "And you? How are you growing in there?" Gradually, I reconnected with the town, with people I knew in childhood. Some still remembered me, the girl who left Willow Springs decades ago. I found Martha, my childhood friend, now a widow like me, with children scattered throughout the United States. We began to meet for coffee, to recall old stories, to share the joys and pains of life. It was Martha who took me to Grace Chapel, where I found a group of women who met weekly to do handicrafts and charity work. I didn't know how to sew well like them, but I offered what I knew: cooking. I began to make cakes and cookies for charity bazaars, for needy families in the region. On my 61st birthday, 6 months after arriving in Willow Springs, I received an unexpected call. It was Timothy's doctor. "Mrs. Grace, your son is having a surprising evolution. He has requested permission to visit you this weekend. Do you feel prepared for this?" My heart raced. "Can he come, doctor?" "Clinically, I believe so. He is stable, properly medicated, and has demonstrated significant insights about his past behaviors. But the final decision is yours. If you think it's still too early—" "No, doctor. It's time. Tell him I'm waiting." That Friday, I arranged the house like never before. I changed the sheets on the bed. Timothy would stay in my room, I would sleep on the sofa, prepared his favorite food, swept the yard where the apple tree was already showing the first signs of blossoms. I was as nervous as a teenager before the first date. When I heard the knocks on the door, I needed to take several deep breaths before opening it. There was my son, thinner, with some white hairs he didn't have before, but with a different look, calmer, more centered. "Hi, Mom." His voice came out low, almost shy. "My son." I opened my arms, and he came to me, not as the possessive man he had been, but as the boy I held in my lap after a nightmare. That weekend was a milestone in our story. We talked a lot, cried together, asked forgiveness from each other. Timothy told me about the treatment, about how he was learning to identify his emotional triggers, to deal with the fear of abandonment. "The doctor says I may never be completely cured, Mom, that it's a process. But I'm learning to control it, not to let it dominate my life, our lives." On Sunday before he left, we went to the backyard together to see the apple tree. "It's growing strong," observed Timothy, gently touching one of the new leaves. "Like you, my son." I held his hand, growing towards the light. When the bus departed, taking Timothy back to Chattanooga, I didn't feel the despair I expected. There was sadness, of course, but also a new hope. We were both finally on the right path. That moment, seeing my son depart not as a desperate rupture, but as a necessary step in our healing journey, was when I knew we had truly turned a page. The metal rod that was once between us had been transformed into something new, not an instrument of threat, but a building tool for a different future. And so, with pain transformed into hope, I continued my reconstruction process in Willow Springs, awaiting the day when my son and I could truly be together again, no longer as jailer and prisoner, but as two free people who choose each other out of true love. The months that followed Timothy's first visit were of discovery and reconstruction. My son continued his treatment in Chattanooga with monthly visits to Willow Springs. Each meeting was better than the previous one. We saw, gradually, a healthier relationship being born between us. The real turning point, however, happened almost a year after my return to Willow Springs. It was a Sunday in March, and I was in the kitchen preparing lunch, a beef stew with vegetables that Timothy had loved since boyhood. I was waiting for him, who would come to spend the weekend with me, as was becoming customary. When I heard the knocks on the door, I went to answer, wiping my hands on my apron. My son was there, with a different expression on his face, lighter, calmer, and beside him, a young woman, pretty, with curly hair and a shy smile. "Mom, this is Emma. She's a social worker at the clinic where I'm being treated." I looked surprised at the young woman, who extended her hand to me. "Nice to meet you, Mrs. Grace. Timothy talks a lot about you." I invited the two in, trying to hide my surprise. Timothy had never brought anyone on his visits. In fact, besides Neil, I couldn't remember my son being seriously involved with any woman. His obsession with protecting me always occupied all the space in his life. During lunch, I observed how Timothy looked at Emma. There was affection there, respect, perhaps the beginning of something deeper. Emma told me she was originally from Louisville, that she had been working with recovery patients for 5 years, and that she met Timothy in the therapy groups at the clinic. Initially, it was a professional relationship, she explained, with a calm voice. But as Timothy evolved in treatment, We began to talk more, to get to know each other outside the sessions. Timothy, who once controlled every aspect of my love life, was now introducing someone important to him. It was as if the universe had turned upside down, but in the most beautiful way possible. After lunch, while Emma helped wash the dishes, Timothy called me to see the apple tree in the backyard. "It's growing well, isn't it, Mom?" He touched one of the green leaves, smiling. "Yes, it is, son. Like you." I looked towards the kitchen, where Emma was softly humming while drying the dishes. "She seems to be a very good young woman." Timothy blushed slightly, as he did when he was a boy. "She is. She helped me a lot, Mom. Not just as a professional. She taught me to see things differently." "What way, son?" "That loving someone isn't controlling them. It's letting them be free. It's respecting the other's space." He took a deep breath. "Everything I didn't do with you." Those words touched deep in my heart. Seeing my son, who once threatened me with a metal rod to prevent my marriage, now understanding the true meaning of love, was like a miracle happening before my eyes. "Mom, there's one more thing I want to tell you." Timothy seemed nervous. "I was approved in a competitive exam for Bank of America here in Missouri. They're going to transfer me to Springfield after I finish the intensive treatment." "Springfield? That's wonderful, son. It's so close to Willow Springs." "Yeah, I'll be able to visit you more often." He hesitated for a moment. "And Emma also got a transfer to the Family Service Center in Springfield. We're thinking about living together." That news, which in other times would have left me jealous or afraid of losing my son, now filled me with genuine joy. It was the definitive proof that Timothy was really healing, building a life of his own, independent from mine. "I'm very happy for you, my son. Really. You're not upset about me living with another woman far from here?" I shook my head, smiling. "Son, all I ever wanted was to see you happy. And now, for the first time, I'm seeing you truly happy, not just worried about me." That night, after Timothy and Emma left, I sat in my rocking chair on the porch, contemplating the stars. I felt a peace I hadn't known for many years. My son was finding his way, and I, finally, was finding mine. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected visit. It was Bernard, Timothy's police officer cousin, who had participated in the operation that arrested Alan. He was in Willow Springs on business and decided to stop by to see me. "Aunt, I brought news that I thought you would like to know." He sat at the kitchen table, accepting the coffee I offered. Alan was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The trial ended yesterday. The mention of Alan's name still caused a twinge in my chest. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't completely forget the man who almost became my husband, who made me believe in a love that was just a facade for his shady business. "And there's one more thing." Bernard hesitated. "During the investigations, we discovered that Alan had a pattern. He approached older women, widows or single, usually with some assets, and used them as cover for his operations." So I was just one more? The pain of the revelation was intense, but somehow also liberating. "Yes, Aunt, you were the 5th. All the others lost almost everything they had." Bernard held my hand over the table. "If it wasn't for Timothy..." "Well, you could be in jail along with Alan, or worse." That revelation was the closing of a cycle for me. Timothy's desperate act, which at the time I saw as the height of his unhealthy obsession, ended up saving me not only from an unhappy marriage, but possibly from prison or death. It was a cruel irony that only now I could fully understand. Thank you for telling me, Bernard. I think I needed to hear this to truly move forward. After he left, I sat in the backyard, near the apple tree that was already beginning to bear its first fruits. I picked an apple still green, feeling its firm texture between my fingers. Like that fruit, I too was in the process of ripening, slowly transforming. The next morning, I made a decision. I took the bus to Lebanon, where I went to the house we still kept rented. I talked to the lawyer who handled the contract and initiated the process to officially transfer the property to Timothy's name. It was my gift to him and Emma to start their life together. When I returned to Willow Springs, I found Martha waiting for me at the door with a worried expression. "Ada, I looked for you all day. Where were you, woman?" "In Lebanon, resolving some matters." "Why? Did something happen?" "Remember the women's group from the chapel? We're organizing a new project, a support center for women victims of violence here in town. The group president nominated you to coordinate." I was speechless. I, who spent years being a victim, was now invited to help other women escape the same fate. But why me? I don't have any experience in this. Yes, you do, Ida. You lived the experience firsthand. And more importantly, you survived to tell the story. I accepted the invitation, more by intuition than by certainty that I could handle the job. The Willow Springs Women's Support Center began small, operating in a room adjoining the chapel. We were only 5 volunteers at first, offering listening, basic legal guidance, and shelter for women in situations of vulnerability. It was in this work that I found a new reason to live. Every time a woman arrived with a downcast look, hunched body, apologizing for her own existence, exactly as I was for so many years, I felt I was doing something truly important. 3 months after the project's beginning, a young woman named Claire sought us out. She was 23, had 2 small children, and marks of beating all over her body. "My husband said if I leave home, he'll kill me," she told, between sobs. "But I can't take it anymore. I'm afraid for my children." That situation reminded me so much of my own story with Neil that I felt as if I was looking at my past. Holding Claire's trembling hands, I told my story publicly for the first time. The years of abuse, the constant fear, the escape to start over, the complicated relationship with my son. "If I manage to get out of that hell and rebuild my life, you can too," I told her. "And you won't be alone. We'll help you." We managed to find a temporary shelter for Claire and her children in Springfield, legal guidance for the complaint against the husband, and even a job in a clothing factory. Weeks later, she returned to the center, already with a different sparkle in her eyes. "Mrs. Grace, you saved my life." At that moment, I understood that my story of pain had a greater purpose. Every scar I carried, every sleepless night, every tear shed, all now served as a beacon for other women lost in the storm of violence. The project grew rapidly. In 6 months, we got support from the City Hall for a larger space. Timothy, already living in Springfield with Emma, came on weekends to help me with the paperwork, the organization, the contacts with official agencies. Seeing my son using his banking knowledge to help vulnerable women was a joy I never imagined experiencing. One Sunday, while we were organizing documents for a state funding request, Timothy made a confession that caught me by surprise. "Mom, do you know why I dedicate myself so much to this project?" He stopped typing on the computer, turning to me. "It's my way of asking forgiveness to all the women who suffer what you suffered. Son, you've already asked for forgiveness. You've already been forgiven. It's not just you, Mom. It's for all the men who, like I almost was, like my father was, 'cause so much suffering." He took a deep breath. "Every time we help one of these women, I feel I'm cleaning a bit of the blood from my father's hands. And from mine." That afternoon, we cried together, not tears of pain or regret, but of liberation. The metal rod that was once between us had been transformed into a tool of reconstruction, not only of our lives, but of the lives of so many women who crossed our path. In 2014, 3 years after the terrible episode of the almost wedding, I received a call from Timothy. "Mom, Emma and I are going to get married, and we want you to be our maid of honor." The wedding took place in Springfield, in a simple but moving ceremony. I, who once thought I would never see my son form his own family, was now there, beside him at the altar, blessing his union with a wonderful woman who helped him find balance. During the celebration, as I watched Timothy dancing with his bride, Emma approached me. "Mrs. Grace, I wanted to thank you." "Thank me for what, my child?" "I'm the one who thanks you for making my son happy. For not giving up on him. Many mothers would have cut ties after what happened. You not only forgave, but helped in the recovery." She smiled, eyes shining with emotion. "Timothy told me everything. About the metal rod, about Alan, about the years of obsessive behavior. And do you know what made me love him even more? Seeing how he recognized his mistakes and worked hard to change. In that moment, I understood that the turnaround in our lives was complete. The tragedy that almost destroyed us had been transformed into a journey of growth and redemption. Months after the wedding, during one of Timothy's visits to Willow Springs, we went together to the backyard to see the apple tree. Now a strong and leafy tree, loaded with red and juicy fruits. "Remember when we planted this seedling, Mom? It was so fragile I thought it wouldn't take. Like us, son. Fragile, almost broken. But look, it bore fruit." Timothy picked a ripe apple, savoring it with pleasure. Sweet, like life can be when we leave the past behind. And it was there, under the shade of that tree that symbolized our journey, that Timothy gave me the news that would complete our turnaround. "Mom, Emma is pregnant. In 7 months, you'll be a grandmother." My heart exploded with joy. I, who almost lost my son to the madness of fear and control, was now gaining an entire family. It was life renewing itself, the cycle completing in the most beautiful way. That night, lying in my bed, I thanked God for having allowed me to live long enough to witness the complete transformation of my story. The metal rod that almost took my life had become, metaphorically, the staff that now supported me in old age and guided me to a future I never imagined possible. And when little Adam was born, yes, Timothy and Emma chose this name as a way to give new meaning to the past. I felt the circle closing, not like a prison, as it was for so many years, but like a welcoming embrace that reconciled me with everything I lived through and survived. And so I reach my 72 years here in Willow Springs with a life I never imagined I would have. Time passes quickly when we find peace, doesn't it? It's been almost 15 years since that terrible day with the metal rod, and it feels like it was in another life with different people. I still live in the same little house I rented when I returned here, but now it feels like a real home. The walls, which were once a boring white, I painted light blue, a color that brings me serenity. In my living room, I have an entire wall of pictures, Timothy and Emma at their wedding, my grandson Adam in various stages, from baby to now, at 9 years old, and little Sarah, who's 6 and has my quiet, observant manner. My routine is simple and brings me great joy. I wake up early, as I've always done, with the first rooster's crow. I have my coffee on the porch, watching the movement in the square. Then I tend to my plants. I have a small garden, but it's colorful, with roses, sunflowers, and herbs that I use in cooking. The apple tree, the very same one I planted when I returned, is now a leafy tree that bears fruit twice a year. 3 times a week, I go to the Women's Support Center, which now operates in its own building, donated by the city. I no longer coordinate the day-to-day operations. I left that work to Mary, a young lawyer full of energy. But I continue to be what they call a senior counselor. It's a fancy name for saying I'm the old lady who tells stories and gives advice based on life experience. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I receive groups of 4 or 5 women at home who are going through difficult situations. We talk, drink coffee, sometimes I cry with them. I don't have professional training for this, of course, but I have the soul scars that give me authority to say, I know what you're feeling, my dear. And I can guarantee there is life after suffering. On weekends, the house becomes livelier. Timothy and Emma come from Springfield with the children. Adam, my oldest grandson, is fascinated by the Ozark stories I tell. Sarah, the little one, prefers to help me in the kitchen, learning the old recipes my mother taught me. We make cornbread, hominy, sweet potato pie, all the food that marks our Midwestern culture. Timothy is doing very well. At 50, he's already the manager of the Bank of America branch in Springfield, respected in the community. He still does therapy once a month, more as maintenance than out of necessity. As he says himself, it's like a car checkup, Mom, better to prevent than to fix. Emma continues at the Family Service Center, now as coordinator, helping families in vulnerable situations. The two form a beautiful partnership, both in marriage and in the social work they do together. Timothy's relationship with the children is what moves me most. He is a present, loving father, but one who respects the individuality of his children. So different from the father he had, and so different even from what he himself might have been, had he not faced his demons. When I see my son playing with Adam and Sarah, without that controlling obsession he once had with me, I know the cycle of pain was broken. My grandson, Adam, who bears the name that came after the man who almost destroyed our lives, has no idea of the story behind his name. For him, it's just a nice, strong name. One day, when he's older, we'll tell him how his name represents not the person who inspired it, but the redemption that came afterward. I have my small daily joys. The first cup of coffee in the morning, Timothy's phone call every night to check how I am. The letters I receive from women who passed through the support center and are now rebuilding their lives in other cities. The conversations with my church friends, women my age, who also carry their stories of pain and overcoming. I don't have luxuries, nor do I need them. My retirement, plus a small help that Timothy insists on giving me every month, is enough to live with dignity. I can even save a little for emergencies and to buy special presents for the grandchildren on birthdays and Christmas. My brother Andrew still lives in Springfield, now with more fragile health. I visit him once a month, spending the weekend with him and Zelda. These are precious moments where we recall our childhood, our parents, the siblings who have already departed. Old age has these things. It reconciles us with the past, even with the painful parts. 3 years ago, I received unexpected news. Alan Morgan, the man who almost became my husband, had died in prison. The information came through Bernard, who is still in the police force and always keeps in touch. I confess I felt nothing, neither joy, nor sadness, nor relief. It was as if that story belonged to someone else, not to me. I just thanked Bernard for the information and continued my day normally. That chapter had been closed for a long time. Sometimes, sitting on my porch on Sunday afternoons, I observe life passing by and wonder how it would be if I had taken other paths. If I had stayed in Lebanon instead of following Timothy to Oak Ridge. If I had married Alan, ignoring my son's warnings. I probably wouldn't be here to tell this story. Perhaps I would be in prison or worse. It's strange to think that the most terrible moment of my life, being threatened by my own son, ended up being what saved me. Recently, I started a small personal project. I'm writing my memoirs in a notebook to leave for my grandchildren. It's not an organized work like a book, just stories, reflections, advice. I want them to know where they came from, the difficulties their grandmother and father faced so they could have the peaceful life they have today. I want them to understand that the strength running through their veins was forged in suffering, but also in love and overcoming. At the support center, I created a ritual with women who managed to leave situations of violence. We take a plant seedling, usually a resilient flower like evening primrose or portulaca, for them to plant in their new homes. This plant, I tell them, will grow along with your new life. Each flower that blooms will be a reminder that you too can flourish after the storm. Last month, one of these women, Jennifer, returned to the center 5 years after having passed through it. She brought in her arms a mature evening primrose, full of flowers. "Mrs. Grace, my plant got so big I had to replant it. I brought a cutting for you so other women can have the same chance I had." At that moment, I cried as I hadn't in a long time. It was confirmation that the work we do has meaning, has continuity. My health, thank God, is still good for a 72-year-old lady. I have high blood pressure controlled with medication, a bit of arthritis on rainy days, and my eyesight isn't what it used to be. I use glasses for reading and sewing. But I still walk to the square every day, still cook my own meals, still take care of the house without needing help. Timothy always insists I should have someone to help me, but I like doing things my way, at my pace. Nights are the loneliest time, I won't deny. When all the chores are done, when the house is quiet, sometimes memory brings back the difficult moments. I remember Neil, his violent hands. I remember Timothy cornering me with the metal rod. I remember Alan, his fake smile that hid so many lies. But I've learned not to let these memories dominate me. They're just ghosts. They can't hurt me anymore. I have a ritual for these difficult hours. I go to the kitchen, make a cup of chamomile tea with herbs picked from my own garden, sit in the rocking chair and open the photo album. I look at photos of my grandchildren, of Timothy and Emma's wedding, of the women we've helped at the center. And slowly, the shadows dissipate, giving way to gratitude for being alive, for having survived, for having transformed so much pain into something useful and beautiful. I never became romantically involved with anyone after Alan. Not because of trauma or fear, but because I discovered a simple truth. I'm fine with myself. My heart is filled with the love of my children, my grandchildren, the friendships I've cultivated, the work I do. If a companion appears someday, he will be welcome. But it's no longer a necessity, as it once was. Life has taught me that we are stronger than we imagine, that we can survive things that seemed impossible to bear, that sometimes our salvation comes from the most unlikely hands, and that it's possible to transform the worst experiences into wisdom and compassion. When I look back at the girl who left Willow Springs, at the young woman who endured an abusive marriage, at the mother who raised a son alone, at the mature woman who almost fell into the trap of another dangerous man, at the lady who returned to her roots to heal, I see a continuous line of learning and growth. And I'm proud of this journey, with all its scars. Today, sitting on my porch in Willow Springs, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink, I can finally say I've found peace. It's not a perfect or constant peace. Real life doesn't work that way. It's a peace that coexists with the pain of memories, with everyday worries, with the awareness of my own mortality. But it's genuine, it's mine, and it was hard-won. And when my grandchildren ask how I managed to get here, I answer with a simple phrase that became my life motto. We don't choose all the storms we face, but we can choose how we'll come out of them, drowned or swimming to the shore. I chose to swim. And here I am, on the beach of my old age, looking toward the horizon with the certainty that despite everything, it was worth it. My dear ones, I've come this far after much struggle. The story I've told isn't just mine. It's the story of so many women who live trapped in relationships that hurt the soul. I've learned that age doesn't define our strength. At 60, when many think life is ending, I discovered that mine was just beginning. My wrinkles are maps of survival. Each one tells a story of pain overcome. Life has taught me that even in the deepest darkness, our inner light never goes out. Even in my darkest days, when Neil was abusing me, when my own son cornered me with that metal rod, there was a spark of hope that refused to die. I discovered that we are stronger than we imagine, especially when we think we can't take it anymore. The human spirit is like the prairie. It seems to die in the drought, but just a little rain is enough for it to be reborn. My story isn't about what they did to me, but about how I chose to respond. Timothy and I could have become bitter people, perpetuating the cycle of violence. Instead, we chose healing, forgiveness, transformation. Abuse leaves invisible scars, but we can flourish even after the storm. Like my apple tree that I planted upon returning to Willow Springs, which started fragile and today provides shade and fruit. If you're going through an abusive situation, seek help. The first step is the most difficult, but also the most important. Remember, you are not alone. Your story still has many chapters to be written, and you are the main author. I sincerely ask that you subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. Each story shared here may be the light someone needs to find their way out. And if this story touched your heart, leave in the comments the word restart. It's a powerful word that carries everything I've learned in these 72 years, that we can always begin again, no matter what happened before. Do it now. Your message might be the hug someone needs at this very moment. From my porch in Willow Springs, contemplating my apple tree that grew along with my liberation, I send each of you my grandmotherly embrace. May you find strength in difficult days and peace in your heart even in life's storms. Thank you for listening to another episode of Grandparents' Tales.